VC Fluency 5. If you recall in the last lecture, we covered what matters, building the narrative, and how priorities shift over time when you're building a company. In this lecture, we're going to look at things a little bit from the perspective of the investor in terms of how to think about building the story that will lead to a comparable analysis and then an exit analysis. First up, quickly covering the difference between M&A and IPOs. M&A is largely done for strategic reasons. You only need to convince one buyer, and they tend to be smaller because they're limited to the balance sheet of like one purchaser. IPOs, on the other hand, they can be much larger, but the biggest difference is consumers and also financial institutions have the ability to look under the hood, and therefore there's much greater scrutiny and much better economics needed for an IPO. It's important to know that M&A is much, much more common. So even though there's this 53 number compared to this 51 number, that's 53 only 100 million plus. Some data from Bain showed that private equity had 420 healthcare IT deals since 2009. And there's a very lack of public information of like M&A exits at this is a sub 100 million range, which I suspect a lot of exits are, especially when you think about provider and payer acquisitions. So in terms of like thinking about building the story, right, what you're really looking for is in the middle here. So a similar story, right, similar business model and customers go to market, ideally some sort of like margins as well. You don't want to just look at the subsector. So you don't look at if you're looking at a health tech deal, don't just look at health tech deals in general. You want to get like more granular than that, ideally a list of like 3 to 10-ish companies. And when you work in venture capital, you actually want even more precision. Like you want to get by funding stage, because in VC, you're also thinking about how much money a company needs in Series A versus Series B and Series C and the dilution that happens there. Versus like if you're more like a casual investor, like angel investor, just exploring VC and don't have the tools available to you, like something similar, like, 5 companies that make sense. And we'll go through examples in a second. One thing I do want to say, especially in venture, you can often underwrite things to be an exit by Optum. So a joke is like everything's an exit by Optum, right? Because Optum is so acquisitive. Here's a map of some Optum acquisitions. And they have plays in every space, in addition to Cigna and Elevance Health. So a good story to tell, especially if you're thinking about building your own company, is how one of your potential exits could be an acquisition by an Optum or another top payer. Usually you might have like the $1 billion IPO as part of your story, but the exit by Optum is a pretty good narrative as a base case. So in terms of like the robust way of building the story, it's like company will exit at this dollar value with Y revenue and Z multiple, right? And exit math, exit value is Y revenue times the Z multiple, after raising A financing over B rounds and C years. And again, this matters more for investors because they do care about dilution every round in a more precise way. While this is a shortcut method, but definitely more commonly used, we're just looking at the valuation price, and then how much de-dilution happens in subsequent rounds. A typical metric for dilution is 80%. Why 80%? If you look at some data from Cardub, you can see that at the seed round, 50th percentile is like 16% dilution. And it's like 8 to 23%. So 20% is used as like a conservative, right? It's a little bit more dilution than 17%. It's an easy number to use. And it works for Series A and Series B as well as an estimate. Series C and pass, 15% tends to be more commonly used, even 10% Series like D, E. But for purposes of doing an exit analysis, if you're an operator, angel investor, like 20% is pretty widely accepted assumption that allows you to just create spreadsheets easier and do your math easier. So going through comparables analysis, upstream, value-based care, elderly primary care enablement, focus on care management and social determinants health connections. The 3 that I came up with just, from doing some research, Evolent, also primary specialty care enablement. So that's the same. Help transition to VBC models. That's the same. What's not the same is risk sharing. They do shared savings. Upstream doesn't make money off shared savings from value-based care enablement. Agilent the same way. They make money from risk sharing. Their way of saying that is if Agilent's customers make additional money, then Agilent makes money too. While Upstream is more charging for services that help with social determinants of health connectivity. And also Oak Street, even though Oak Street is more of a care delivery, while like Upstream, Agilent Health seems to be more like technology. It is still in the elderly care space, focused on preventative and integrative care. So I thought it was fair to include it as a comparable. I definitely recommend ChatGPT as a first step for doing your comparables analysis. It's not perfect, but it allows you to get a quick start. Also, it's really helpful in terms of like pulling like revenue, valuation, multiples, and also like sources for all of that information. Because when you're thinking about comparables, honestly, the most challenging part is like thinking of them is tends to be challenging, but the most challenging part is like finding comparables of good data, like good revenue, good exit, especially since a lot of these numbers are only available when a company exits or are public. So in the VC world, is for a lot of these numbers, you might need to ask other VC friends about deals that they've seen with comparable numbers, especially in like those early stages like seed, Series A, Series B. But yeah, ChatGPT can at least let you know more quickly if this data is like publicly available versus it not being. So here's for Upstream. I use ChatGPT. I put it in the table. We see Evolent, Oak Street, median total raise of 265 million. See the valuation, 5.1 billion, multiple 2.55, years to exit 5.7. And this, we'll go back to this for the exit analysis. But this is a starting point in terms of like, if you have thinking about Upstream care and thinking about how to build like the math in order to determine what your hypothesis is for what the exit story could look like in terms of the dollar value and all these variables as well. So to show you like a more trickier one, like Turquoise Health, healthcare data company leveraging price transparency data, and they also have some solutions in contract management, life sciences, and employers. I did an initial poll on ChatGPT searching for Turquoise Health, and it gave me a very similar list as Upstream Care. And it also had like top payers like United Health, Cigna, Optum as compared to Turquoise Health. I didn't think that was fair or accurate. Turquoise Health is a price transparency company, it's a data company. So I reframed it and instead ask, well, a list of comparables for a healthcare data company with revenue, with the revenue valuation, multiple number of exits. And I asked a similar question. How about for like a healthcare contract management company? And this actually gave me a good list, right? It's still not perfect, right? Like looking through it, Health Verity, I think that's fair. Like metadata, that is more of like a clinical trials, like technology solution. So I don't think that's fair. And you go on and go on. But again, it's a start. You'll need to verify it. But hey, makes finding these numbers a lot easier. So yeah, these are comparators I came up with using that prior list: Health Verity, Trillion Health, Prescani, more on the data side, and then the contract revenue management cycle side, Model N, and like Waystar. And there's data available for all of these. So that's great. So, takeaways from doing this comparables analysis, there's a few ways to tell a story, right? Like the IPO versus the exit. It's good to have comparables that have both IPO and exits, so you can construct both stories. Timing is a very important thing. Both timing of the exit, but just also like contemporary market attitudes towards exits. Companies will wait till exit until like markets recover, and that's what's happening in 2024. It's a little bit of a game of chicken, except we did see some recent exits from Tempest. So hopefully that changes in the near future. And it's also part science, part very art. So again, the hardest part is finding comparables you can find data on, right? So it's often more of what you look for versus the most perfect comparables. And lastly, to reiterate, inside information is helpful, but it's not necessary, especially if you're trying to get financing for those in-between rounds instead of just the exit. which is more important for venture capitalists. That is really tricky to find unless you have venture capitalist friends. But again, in terms of more of a casual or angel investment or exploring venture, just having that final exit amount and with a few comparables tends to be enough. So thank you for VC Fluency 5. Done here. On to the next one. Bye.